How to Revise an Essay by India Willis, July the 25th, 2019. When revising an essay, make sure that you have a clear introduction, supporting point, and conclusion. A well-organized essay or article leads the readers through a clear line of thinking. Make sure your sentences make sense for the type of paper that you're writing, and don't be afraid to move paragraphs or sentences around in the paper. Revision is the process of reviewing, analyzing, editing, and proofreading. Writing work to improve its quality. Learning how to revise writing is an important skill for students, writers, business professionals, and others who are concerned about producing high quality writing work. Whether you're writing a school paper, a magazine article, a business report, or an online blog post, you can improve the organization, clarity, and accuracy of writing pieces to produce high quality. Focusing on structure and clarity. Introduction. Introduce your topic with the thesis and relate it to the prompt. An essay should have 3 paragraphs about it. Discuss one main point per paragraph, evidence and encounter arguments, and analyze. Conclusion. Conclude by restarting the thesis statement over. Ensure that you have a clear introduction, supporting point, and a conclusion. A well-organized essay or article leads the reader through a clear line of thinking. Make sure your structure makes sense of type of paper that you're writing, and don't be afraid to move paragraphs and sentences around in the paper. For example, in how-to articles, the steps should be in chronicle order with clear instructions. In a thesis paper, your strongest argument should be presented in the beginning of the paper, and each of your paragraphs should pertain to some aspects of the thesis. To end the paper, you'll have a conclusion that restated your thesis, as which I explained in slide 1. Ask questions about your thesis to make sure your introduction is sound. Think of questions that could put holes in your thesis or facts and disapprove your thesis as a result. Make sure your writing has important to refluence these claims. Ensure that your main argument or point is stated clearly. If you're using terminology that the reader may not understand, clarify its meaning and context before the thesis to prepare the readers for the paper. Or if you are including an index or glossary, define these terms there. For example, if your paper claims that the growing popularity of coffee chain is causing the decline of local coffee shops, you might ask, but what about the cities that have both successful coffee chains and local shops? In your paper, you should have a point that discusses why some cities are able to support both small coffee shops and national chains. If your thesis describes an interpretation of Room 101 in 1984 as of the Winston Insecurity as a partner, you might ask, what about people who claim that Room 101 could represent his fear of the unknown? In your paper, make sure you have a paragraph to discuss these alternate options and why yours is the most strongly supported. If your thesis isn't clear or can easily be refluted, don't be afraid to start the work over again. It's better to have a strong paper with a well thought out thesis. Read your conclusion out loud to determine if it affects ending. The ending of your writing should feel like the end of an important speech. Make sure you're reinforcing the main ideas of the piece and call the reader's attention to the importance of the topic. If your conclusion is missing a discussion of the main topic of the paper, try to restart your points and thesis to wrap up the paper. In an essay, the conclusion should be a brief summary of your thesis and main points. The conclusion of a blog might be call to attention or a request of input from the readers. Remove repeated words, phrases, and ideas to make the paper more polished. Scan the paper for words and phrases that you repeated. Delete ideas that have already been explained elsewhere in the paper, and vary a sentence structure to avoid repeating subjects and verbs. If you need to look up synonyms for frequently used words, for existence, if you find yourself using the word fear repeatedly in your essay, consider replacing it with a synonym. If you're repeating the main idea throughout your writing, try to find a way to connect it to the point of the paragraph or transition into the next paragraph. For example, instead of saying this proves that local coffee shops go out of business more often when in competition with national chains, you could say, while local coffee shops go out of businesses at higher rates when in competition with national chains, that isn't the only reason these establishments are forced to close their doors. Be sure to examine sentences level as well. Make sure the same words aren't used more than once in the sentence. If they are, replace one of the words with synonyms. Thank you for listening to my presentation.